What is the biggest threat to mankind of the 21st century? In my view, it is undoubtedly the climate change across the planet Earth. The world at large is getting rudely jolted with predictable regularity the impact of climate change. Unusual seasonal patterns, extreme heat waves, snowstorms, floods, droughts, landslides have become almost routine across the world. While the activists, ESG proponents, governments are getting into the act, one notices a kind of compartmentalized perspective on the solutions for the impact. What perhaps is needed, in my view, is to correlate different elements of the adverse impact on the nature, humans, and more importantly, the social fabric to appreciate the gravity. Only then the remedial strategies can be effectively worked out. In this presentation, I would try to elaborate how climate change is affecting human infertility, how seeds are losing their potency, and lastly, how it is resulting in increase in the occurrence of child early and forced marriages, a phenomenon called as CEFM, child early and forced marriages. Let me first touch upon female infertility due to climate change. I have genuine apprehension that apart from short term reproductive health impacts, climate related events are going to influence the risks of long term and, if I had to use the word, intergenerational mortality and morbidity for both birthing parents and offspring. As climate conditions continue to deteriorate in future generations, less healthy parents will give birth to less healthy offspring who themselves will experience increased risk of reproductive outcomes. This intergenerational process causes a repeated cycle of poor parental preconception health, gestational complications, and poor offspring health, which leads to a suboptimal preconception health among those offspring when they reach reproductive age. It is now more or less established by several empirical studies that gestational complications like hypertension during pregnancy, diabetes, renal dysfunction, and cardiometabolic complications are all the direct result of climate change. Depression and other mental health problems can be exacerbated by the consequence of extreme climate events such as the loss of loved ones or loss of property, long-term disruption of infrastructure, forced migration, and food insecurity, all of which can increase the risk of adverse pregnancy outcomes, many of which in turn increase long-term morbidity and mortality. Clearly, pregnancy outcomes and complications associated with climate events have implications for lifelong morbidity and mortality among birthing parents, as I mentioned before. And the real concern is that these effects will not be confined only to the mother, but will continue to affect the progenies for generations. Now, let me turn my attention to food insecurity. Let me take an example of rapeseed. We all know that rapeseed is an important oilseed crop worldwide. Research study on this oilseed has conclusively proved that at 34 degrees centigrade, the plant appearance, the seed yield, the viability, the quality, and embryo development is defective, resulting in reduced or aborted fertilization. Number of studies have demonstrated that heat stress reduces the pollen viability and fertilization events in pea, rice, chickpea, sorghum, resulting in low weight and bad seed quality. To put it in simple words, heat shock or heat stress affects homeostasis adversely. Heat stress affects overall plant growth and its architecture. What does it mean? It implies acute food shortage across the globe because of the climate change. Now, let me come to the impact of climate change on our social fabric, and this is a very important part of the presentation. Extreme weather causes an increase in the occurrence of child early and forced marriage. I use the word CEFM, early and forced marriage, by intensifying elements of structural oppression such as gender inequality and poverty, according to a study very recently published in the Journal of International Social Work. Gender based violence and inequities worsen in extreme weather contexts. This has adverse impact on women and girls' resilience during weather extreme climate and disasters. Researchers from Ohio State University, led by Dr. Fiona Doherty, did a review of 20 studies from 2010 to 2022 connecting droughts, floods, and other extreme weather events to increases in child early and forced marriages, particularly in low and middle income countries. The studies conducted were from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Kenya, Indonesia, Malawi, Nepal, Tanzania, Vietnam, and sub-Saharan Africa. The researchers found that CEFM, child early forced marriages, was used as an adaptive coping strategy to reduce economic vulnerabilities in extreme weather contexts. Child marriage is often seen as a coping strategy to reduce economic vulnerability and food insecurity that a family is facing because of a disaster. In Bangladesh, daughters were married early after Cyclone Elia in 2009 to reduce their economic and food burden on the household. In Kenya, young brides are sought to help with increased labor demands, such as walking long distances to find food and water. In Malawi, girls exposed to drought were more likely to be married early compared to those living in non drought areas. Bride price and dowry was an important factor in the link between child early forced marriages and extreme weather. The researchers found that girls in sub Saharan Africa or Vietnam, where the groom's family paying a bride price to the bride's family, is a local custom which had an increased probability of child early forced marriages during droughts and rainfall shocks. But in regions where dowry is common, such as India, girls were less likely to get married during a drought year because the bride's family could not afford dowry payment. So it cuts both ways. In several studies, it was found that parents resorted to early marriage of their children to protect daughters from sexual violence and avoid family dishonor. Rates of sexual assault often escalate during times of crisis, particularly in evacuation camps or temporary shelters. The main driver of child marriage is gender inequality. Education, skill development, and financial control are the key drivers to empowering women and girls and allowing them to take their own decisions and be in charge of their destiny. To conclude, it is high time that the world wakes up to the monumental damage that the climate change is inflicting not only on the present generation but on the future generations as well, and takes not a myopic but a holistic view of how to tackle this uh, um, shock that is befallen on the humanity. Thank you very much.